Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I thought I would take a moment to talk about mindfulness. I might hit on a little bit of why it's important, what it is, how it's different from meditation. I guess just kind of sum it up. Okay, so what is mindfulness? To me, mindfulness is the deliberate act of being present in the moment. That sounds pretty basic, but it's kind of like intentionally bringing your attention out of your mental chatter and away from your negative thoughts and away from your patterns of behavior and becoming aware in this very moment of your senses and exactly what you are doing. So mindfulness is kind of about bringing yourself back to center, back to this moment, out of your future worrying or your past thinking, and just to the here and now. So like meditation, mindfulness is a practice. It's not necessarily, you don't go into mindfulness with the intention to, achieve some state of well-being or state of clarity or intuition. It's really a practice of being in this moment. It's about bringing your awareness into a present state. So mindfulness is really, it's a practice. You have to practice it because we all have the default of mental chatter and negative programming. So we all spend a lot of our time thinking of the future or dwelling in the past, and we can be in activities, in our work, in our life, working away like autopilot and not actually focusing on what we're doing in that current moment. And mindfulness is much easier to practice when we're sitting on a hillside watching a sunset or, watching boats float along the ocean or in beautiful settings that make us feel calm. But when we're at work and we're checking, the 90 emails that have come in overnight, or, we're pushing through whatever it is we need to get done in the next, hour or day, it's hard to stay present because our minds are like, oh, once I answer these emails, I've got to do this work, I've got that meeting at 3, I've got to pick up the kids, I've got grocery shopping to do. Everyone's head kind of runs off to what's next. So mindfulness is really about catching yourself in that running ahead or dwelling in the past and bringing yourself back to this very moment. And that's usually done by engaging the senses. So through things like taking 3 deep breaths or, grounding your feet, becoming aware of your feet on the ground, noticing where you are in that moment. It can be things like, okay, where am I? I'm at my desk. I'm taking 3 deep breaths. My feet are on the floor. I can hear the noises behind me. That's the traffic outside. My hands are cold. Just bringing your awareness back to what you can sense in that very moment. That is the act of mindfulness. That's the practice. And that's bringing you out of, the chatter in your brain. It's one of those things that for me, I like to set up mindfulness triggers. So that's things like little reminders dotted out throughout my day that remind me to be present. So if I'm driving, I tend to go on autopilot. How scary is that? And I know lots of people do. We know, our designated route and the way we normally drive, and we don't think too much about it. And that's dangerous. So I set red lights as mindfulness triggers. So every time I stop at a red light, I take 3 deep breaths and I just bring myself back to where I am and what I'm doing and become aware of it. Throughout my day, it's things like, oh gosh, I can't even think now. So throughout the day, there are things you can use that are mindfulness triggers, like setting an alarm on your phone. Don't make it something shocking, maybe something that tinkles or makes a bell sound that reminds you to stop and take a deep breath and just come back to the moment. And that could be something that you set on your phone, but I know there are great apps as well. I know Headspace have mindfulness alarms set into them that just remind you to stop and breathe. My mother-in-law has one that goes off at 7 o'clock every night, and the moment the phone goes ping, all of us in the room just stop and take a breath. It's built into us now that we recognize that as a moment to stop and breathe. But it can also be things like, okay, every day you have a 10 o'clock meeting. So before that 10 o'clock meeting, you get up, you have a drink of water, you put your feet on the ground, you take a couple of big deep breaths, and you go forward aware and not in the next thing you have to get done. So the one roadblock I tend to hear a lot of people come up against is the idea that meditation or mindfulness means they have to stop thinking. And I mean, let's be honest, that's practically impossible. That's what your brain does. It's the function of that organ to think. Everything that you do, from talking to breathing, has a brain-related, process. So stopping thinking is, it's really hard. It's impossible. So the idea isn't to stop your thoughts, but to become present in them instead of allowing them to just run away. Instead of letting yourself run away with your thoughts, it's about actually being aware of your mental chatter without judgment or criticism. That sounds pretty straightforward, but we all have a level of mental chatter, and there are always things in our mind that we are putting to the side to think about later, or we're putting off thinking about completely, or we're running from. And quieting the mind can be a real challenge when you know that there's some darkness in there. You know that there's some hurt in there, or there's something that's happened to you that you don't want to give mental thought or time to. So quieting the mind is really hard. And I know that when people come to me and they say, I can't meditate or I can't do mindfulness, it's usually because there is something in their minds that they don't want to think about. And going quiet, dropping into that awareness, brings those thoughts you're running from forward. And it's that fear of that happening that creates insomnia in people, and prevents people from sleeping, or prevents people from sitting still. So they know that if they stop, they're going to have to think about it. And that's the hard thing. And I've said it before, you can't heal what you don't want to feel. You can't make anything better if you keep burying it and pushing it away. It will always come back and bite you in the ass. And that's the practice with mindfulness and meditation, is allowing the depth of your thought and the depth of your fear to actually rise to the surface without judging yourself, without hating on yourself, without being afraid, and with knowing the universe will catch you. The universe has your back and you don't need to be scared. But that's the hardest part. That's the thing that most people come up against, is their own fears, their own darkest side. We're all light and dark. We all carry both. We all have things that have happened in our lives that we don't know how to deal with, that we've pushed aside or we've pushed down. And we all have moments where we've potentially not acted from a place of integrity and kindness. And we all have light as well. We all have the ability to be kind and generous and loving. There's no good or evil. We are all components of both. And it's about meeting yourself in that space without judging yourself, without hating yourself, and finding love and compassion for your true essence, which isn't made up of those things. It's not, the shopping list of right and wrong that you've done. You are you, your heart and soul, your purest light. And that's the part you need to meet and greet within yourself without judging anything that has happened to you. And it's about self-love, and that's what I'm all about. So it's one of those things. It's challenging, but it's worth it. Because if you can push through it, you can come out the other side more whole, more kind to yourself, more loving, and more gentle on yourself. Because let's be honest, we're all our own bullies. We all sit there and judge how we look, or what we say, or what we've done, or whether something's happened to us that we carry shame about because we feel like on some level maybe we caused it. And that's the hardest part. It's finding compassion for yourself. Okay, so I'm going to try and explain how mindfulness impacts the brain. and I'm no scientist, so forgive me if I ramble on a little bit or get totally lost or just screw it up. So from my understanding of brain development, each time we do an activity or an exercise, the brain creates a neural pathway from what we are doing to the end goal of that action. So when we're teaching children, you see that they need repetition, they need practice before they hone a skill. And that's the same thing with us, except as adults, we don't really let ourselves or allow ourselves the space to learn. We kind of like to get things straight away. But because we have neural pathways that have gone, down that road or down similar roads several times, we have information in our brains to draw on when we start a new activity. Mindfulness is interesting in the sense that you're literally rewiring the brain. So when I talk about being on autopilot or, default behavior, I'm talking about you and your actions traveling down a well-worn neural pathway. So, you know that there is a person in your family who triggers your anger. So when that person pisses you off, there's a pattern of behavior in the relationship, and it tends to go down there each time it happens. Or that there is, a situation that has happened to you in your childhood and has happened again in adulthood, and, it's a way that you've been made to feel, and your reaction is the same each time. You get reactive. And that's a well-worn neural pathway. It's a way that you've learned to respond. And that's the same with, daily activities. We drive the same way to work all the time, or, we go for a walk and we walk the same paths. As humans, we're very repetitive in our behavior. And that's because we have these neural pathways, like little roads that we've formed. And when you learn mindfulness, you're kind of halting halfway down the path and stopping and going, hang on, is this a reactive behavior? Is this a learned behavior? What's happening in this moment? And you pause along the pathway, you become aware of it, you don't judge it, and you allow yourself the space to choose again, to make a different decision, to be in the moment instead of in where you believe it's going to go. You bring yourself back, and then you decide, you choose again, and you get to say, hang on, I don't want this behavior to go this way. I don't want this relationship to feel this way. I don't want this argument again. And then you reroute the pathway. And that takes time because neural pathways are formed with repetition. So each time you bring your awareness to the present moment, you take a few breaths, you come into your senses, and you exit the mental chatter of your brain. And without judgment, you come back to where you are, how you're feeling, and what the next thing is you want to do instead of the next 10, but just the next step. Then you're rewiring the neural pathway down a different track. And the more you do that, your brain's neuroplasticity will form new pathways, but they take time and they take repetition. So in that sense, mindfulness is a practice, like learning to ride a skateboard. Each time you get on, you get a little bit better. Each time you fall, you get better at judging the hazards and perceiving what might happen. And that's the same thing with mindfulness. It's about getting back on the horse and trying again. And each time you get better at it, the pathway gets stronger. So I hope that makes sense, because I don't have all the language about cortexes and all the other stuff that comes with brain development. But from my understanding, it's about rerouting the neural pathways and forming new ones. And when you do that, your default behaviors start to fall away. And your default behavior then will be being present and in the moment and being aware and making present choices instead of just acting out a learnt behavior. So why is mindfulness important, or what can it do? How can it benefit you? So for me and my understanding, anxiety is fear of the future, and I've lived with an anxiety disorder probably my whole life, actually, when I think back on it. Being afraid of what you don't know. You know, when you're going to go into a social setting and you don't know who's going to be there, how you're going to get there, what's going to happen when you are there, how you're getting home. All the little things can trigger anxiety, how someone's going to treat you. And you're in that what's going to happen thinking. Depression is when you are in the dark spaces in your mind. You're in the things that have happened to you. You're in the past. You're in the hurt. You're in the trenches of your own brain. You're in those parts where you've buried things and you're worrying about them, and then that depression becomes worrying that those things will be repeated in your future, which causes the anxiety, and they kind of just become this whirlwind of emotion. Being present takes you out of that. It takes that away and brings you just to here. And that can help manage anxiety, and that can help manage depression. I know that those mental disorders are really challenging. They're very difficult, because I know myself that I've had to dig my way out of those spaces in my mind. And I still default to anxiety a lot of the time, and I don't even realize it in the moment. And then I have to go, hang on, where were my thoughts just then? Why was I worrying about that? And bring awareness to it. And that's where it's a practice. That's where mindfulness is a practice. Scientifically, they've been able to prove through like MRIs of the brain that mindfulness practice can create new neural pathways, thickening of other ones, and can light up different parts of the brain on an MRI scan. It literally can change the way you think and the way you react. Instead, you respond. It can bring calm and gives you a moment of clarity to get out of that whirlwind of what you're doing, what has to happen next, and the shopping list of your day. And then it improves your mental health, because it gives you moments to stop and settle instead of being in that rat race and, running in your mind to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. It just brings you back to center. For me, that's worth it. Learning to meditate and mindfulness changed my life. And for me, I would never go back, and I couldn't, because I've now rewired my brain that way. But it takes time, and it takes practice. But the benefits outweigh, I think, the fear of what it is. And really, meditation and mindfulness, they kind of come together. I think it's very hard to meditate if you can't be in the moment, but they are different things. There are mindfulness meditations, and they're things like, you can find them on YouTube. There are recordings, and they're meditations that bring you into the moment. So they are either breathing meditations or meditations that get you to bring your awareness to the sounds you can hear outside of you, from the traffic down the street to the birds singing outside, to the sounds you can hear within yourself. So your own breathing, your heartbeat, the thoughts in your mind. And then they bring you down again into your center and try and make you aware of your passing thoughts. Like clouds on the wind, you have a thought come up and you go, oh yeah, I have to do that later. And you go, okay, I'll actually think about it later when I have to do it. And let it pass instead of thinking about it. And that's, it's tricky and it takes practice, but it's worth it in the end, because you don't realize how much space in your brain you use chattering on about things you're worrying about. And when you can clear that space, you can clear more, you can think more clearly, and it takes the fogginess away. And for me, that is worth it. And I hope it's worth it for you too. Anyway, thank you for listening again today, and I look forward to talking to you again next week. If there's anything you'd like me to talk about, please pop a comment below and like and subscribe to this video. Bye.